Welcome to Skinner and Chalmers' weekly roast. Today, a sparkling gathering. The tale of the Sparkledog and furry conventions in unusual places.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Skinner and Chalmers' Weekly Roast, a podcast where only the steamiest topics are discussed. It's the 25th of March, and I'm Superintendent Chalmers, and as always, by my side is my good old friend, Principal Seymour Skinner. Welcome, Seymour. Nice to have you here again.
Hello, Chalmers, and hello to our wonderful listeners. I hope you all had a great weekend and day so far.
Oh yes, I hope so too. And if not, don't worry. We'll both make sure your day is more joyful with today's episode.
Definitely, because with today's topic, the mood must automatically rise. Because we want to talk about the time I used a Sparkledog as an excuse for the fire in the kitchen.
Once again, a very abstruse topic for today.
Anyone who wasn't there will think to themselves, what the hell has Skinner cooked up again? But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's start by explaining what food you actually planned for the day and what a Sparkledog actually is.
All right, so let me set the scene for you. It was a typical Sunday morning, and I decided to whip up some breakfast for myself and you. I thought, why not try something different than the usual pancakes or eggs? So I settled on making biscuits decorated with a rainbow glaze from scratch.
Now I remember, the house smelled like a sweet dream. But then, things took a turn for the worse.
Yes, they did. While the biscuits were baking, Cosmo got curious and knocked over a bottle of edible glitter onto the stove. That's when the real trouble started.
You mean the moment the glitter caught fire?
Exactly, and that's when I came up with the brilliant idea of blaming it on a Sparkledog. I figured it would sound ridiculous enough that no one would take it seriously. It served to lighten the mood. And well, you know, Cosmo and glitter, I thought Sparkledog would fit thematically.
And you know what it did? When the fire department arrived, they couldn't stop laughing. They really had to keep a grip on the water hose. They almost didn't point it at the fire because they were laughing so hard. You should have seen the look on their faces when I mentioned your Sparkledog story.
You know how it is sometimes. Chalmers, the whole room filled with smoke almost instantly, and the biscuits turned black as coal. I panicked and needed a quick explanation for the sudden plume of smoke coming from our kitchen. And if the excuse makes you all laugh, then all the better. I'm not a serious, stiff bloke guy like Crosshair from the Bad Batch. I'm relaxed, easygoing, and remain calm and ready for a joke, even in situations like this.
Haha, indeed. You were trying so hard not to laugh while explaining the situation to our neighbors.
Yeah, I couldn't help but crack a smile thinking about it now. I told them that a Sparkledog had come through the window, saw the glitter on the stove, and accidentally caused the fire.
And do you remember what I said to you after everyone left and we were alone again?
Yes, you told me never to forget about the Sparkledog and its love for sparkling food.
Exactly. Never forget Sparkledog, I said. His favorite food is a can of sparkle. I could barely contain myself, Skinner. We sat there for a few minutes just laughing uncontrollably. Just the two of us. A burnt kitchen and the smell of wet ashes. Not necessarily the most romantic setting, but enough for the two of us.
It was quite the sight, Chalmers, and to this day, every time I see a can of edible glitter, I think of that incident, chuckle to myself, and remember the camaraderie we showed that day.
Well, that story certainly brightened up many people's days, didn't it? Even though it wasn't the best cooking experience, it made for one heck of a tale.
Indeed it did, Chalmers, and it just goes to show that sometimes life throws us curveballs, or in this case, Sparkledogs, and all we can do is roll with it and find humor in the chaos.
I couldn't agree more, Seymour. But it just occurred to me, shouldn't we perhaps explain to our viewers what a Sparkledog is?
Yes, Chalmers, you're absolutely right. A Sparkledog. Now there's a fascinating creature. Let me tell you all about them.
Oh boy, here we go.
In simple terms, a Sparkledog, also known as a sparkle, is a sentient character, often anthropomorphic animals displaying unique hairstyles and fur colors or patterns, which include rainbows. Now, Chalmers, my dear friend, you must remember Cosmo, my orb pet.
Of course. How could I forget that little guy? Always getting into trouble.
Exactly. If Cosmo had decided to dye his fur and add some extra flair, he would definitely qualify as a Sparkledog.
So they're basically anthropomorphic creatures with rainbow fur and unique styles.
Precisely. And while the term Sparkledog might suggest that only canines can be part of this vibrant gang, it applies to other non-canine species as well. We call them sparkly animals when they're not canine.
Wow, so they're not limited to dogs alone, but other animals too. This is getting more interesting by the minute, Skinner.
Not done yet, Chalmers. Some folks with Sparkledog fursonas are often labeled as just sparkles. Now, let's not confuse fursona with your everyday furry, Chalmers. A fursona is essentially an anthropomorphic alter ego representing the individual's personality through their chosen character.
Fascinating stuff, Skinner. I don't know anything about the scene, but it's really exciting to hear about it. Maybe I'll get myself a fursuit one day. Maybe a fox with a long, bushy tail. Or I could finally make a cosplay for Spider Shark. But wait, why are they called sparkles? Sparkles. What's so special about them?
Ah, the origin of the term Chalmers. It started off as a derisive term, but over time its usage has grown to be more neutral. In fact, some furries proudly embrace the label, seeing it as a badge of honor rather than an insult.
So it went from being a negative term to something people actually take pride in. Quite the turnaround, don't you think? So, what do we learn from that? You lovely people out there, show the world what you're made of. If people put stones in our way, get them out of the way. We draw strength and power from bad things and grow beyond ourselves. Everyone is a unique personality. Our individuality is what defines us. Don't let others tell you anything. You are wonderful just the way you are, no matter if a sparkle dog, sparkle cat, sparkle Pete, sparkle beetle, or whatever. Don't forget that.
Oh, Chalmers. Wherever that totally blatant motivational speech came from. But I agree, 100%. No matter what size, shape, hair color, skin, or whatever.
Well, Skinner, if I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. In that sense, I hope that this, dear listeners, gives you something for life.
Thank you for this input, Chalmers. It really touches me. We humans should always respect each other, be kind to each other, and make the world a better place. Ah, and by the way, these sparkle dogs are often seen sporting extreme accessories, unusual anatomies, and wild hairstyles. They're closely linked to various fashion subcultures like scene, rave, and cybergoth.
Sounds like a pretty diverse group, then. I suppose the common thread between them all is that bright, unnatural coloration?
That's correct, Chalmers. However, it's essential to note that simply having unnatural colors doesn't make a character a sparkle dog. There needs to be a combination of factors including, but not limited to, excessive accessories, bizarre anatomy, and over-the-top hairstyles.
So it's not just about the colors, it's the whole package. Got it, Skinner?
Yes, indeed, Chalmers. Over the years, these characters have become less infamous and more fondly remembered, mainly due to nostalgia or those who appreciate the colorful aesthetic.
Well, now I understand why you were talking about edible glitter earlier, Skinner. Those sparkle dogs really left an impression on you, huh?
Indeed they did, Chalmers, and I wouldn't have it any other way. After all, variety is the spice of life, isn't it?
It certainly is, Skinner. You know, now that we've delved deep into the world of sparkle dogs, perhaps it'll explain why there was smoke billowing from your kitchen last night. Was it a sparkle dog gathering gone awry?
Oh, Chalmers, you're far too kind. It was merely a small gathering of local enthusiasts, eager to share their passion for all things Sparkledog. As always, my culinary skills took center stage, though it seemed Cosmo decided to add a touch of flair with his orb powers.
Cosmo, the orb pet. I should have known. Always causing mischief with his powers. But it sounds like everyone had a great time, despite the slight mishap.
Absolutely, Chalmers. And that's what matters most, right? The joy and camaraderie shared among friends, even if it means explaining another burnt dish to the neighbors.
Agreed, Skinner. To each their own. Just remember next time to keep Cosmo away from the stovetop, would you?
Understood, Chalmers. My word as a headmaster.
But seriously, Skinner, what was going on in your kitchen that day? I thought it was a fire, but you vehemently said it was just a furry convention in the kitchen.
Ah, yes, the Grand Masquerade. A furry convention indeed. We were discussing everything from anthropomorphic animals to the history of their representation in popular culture.
Furry conventions sound quite fascinating. How many attendees were present during this lively discussion?
Well, we had a nice mix of regular folks and some more unique individuals. Let's see. We had Cassidy the dog, Penelope the cat, Oriza the horse, and even a few representatives from the reptile community, for example, Andreas, who dressed up as my pet alligator. All in all, around 12 participants, I think.
And what about the main topic of discussion at this convention? Were you role-playing as different animal characters or something like that?
Not exactly, Chalmers. Though some may have indulged in such behavior, our primary focus was on sharing stories and insights about living a life inspired by the furry fandom. We also held a competition to create the best fursona name, which led to some rather creative and hilarious entries.
That does sound like an entertaining event. So, why did this supposed convention happen in your kitchen, of all places?
Ah, Chalmers, dear friend, it seems Cosmo here has developed quite the taste for themed parties. He insisted we hold it in the kitchen so he could serve up his latest magical concoction, the Sparkledog Spritzer. Quite delightful, I must say.
All right, Skinner, I think I get the picture. Your kitchen doubles as both a cooking laboratory and a social hub for unusual gatherings. Just be sure to warn your guests about Cosmo's penchant for pyrotechnics, will you?
Will do, Chalmers. I promise to keep our home safe from any future orb-related incidents. And before I forget, Sonic was at the furry convention, too. He didn't even need a fursuit, obviously.
Now let's rewind a bit. A furry convention in your kitchen, Skinner. Care to explain what on earth that might look like?
Well, Chalmers, you know how we sometimes host game nights with our friends? Imagine something similar, but instead of board games, everyone's dressed up in unique attire. It's quite the spectacle, I must admit.
Unique attire, huh? And by unique, you mean anthropomorphic animal costumes, right?
Precisely. You see, these furries, they have a deep love for animals and express that through their creativity. Some even go so far as to create their own elaborate costumes.
So, imagine my surprise walking into your house one morning and finding Sonic, Yugi, and half the town's sporting tails and ears.
Oh, yes. And don't forget Shadow. The poor guy couldn't decide which species to represent, so he went as a chameleon. Blended in with the walls, if you can believe it.
I suppose that makes sense, given his ability to change colors. But tell me, Skinner, why would such a gathering occur in your kitchen?
Well, you know my affinity for international cuisine, Chalmers. This particular night, I decided to whip up some Japanese curry. You remember how much you loved it last time, right?
Indeed, I do. That was the night I had 3 servings and vowed never to eat again something else. But seriously, Skinner, how does a furry convention end up in someone's kitchen?
Ah, that's the beauty of it, Chalmers. Our little town doesn't have a large venue suitable for these types of events. Plus, I happen to have the largest space available thanks to my recent expansion.
Expansion? When did this happen? And more importantly, why wasn't I invited to the groundbreaking ceremony?
Oh, Chalmers, I apologize for not extending an invitation. The truth is, I didn't expand my house. I merely knocked down a few walls, made the living room and dining area feel more spacious.
Ah, I see. And I thought I knew everything about your renovations. So, back to the furry convention. What was the main topic of discussion among your guests?
Aside from debating the merits of various fursuits, they spent hours discussing the intricacies of their favorite animated series. There was quite the debate over whether Beastars or Pokemon featured the superior cast of anthropomorphic characters.
Fascinating. And I assume you played Peacemaker during those heated discussions?
Not exactly. My role was more akin to a mediator, ensuring that no blood was shed over differing opinions. Thankfully, nobody got clawed or bitten.
I bet the Japanese curry was the real star of the evening, though. With all those different animal costumes and lively discussions, it must have been quite the sight.
Indeed, Chalmers. It was a true melting pot of culture and creativity. And, as usual, I ended up burning the curry. But hey, at least the furries added some flair to the cleanup process, am I right?
Yes, indeed, Skinner. You certainly managed to turn every cooking disaster into an unforgettable event. But Skinner, one thing is stuck in my head from our conversation before. I still can't believe you invited our Speedy Gonzales a K Sonic to the furry con in your kitchen. You know, he can have an allergic reaction to the synthetic fibers in the fursuits.
No, Chalmers, calm down. Sonic just happened to drop by after finishing his rounds around the neighborhood here in Memafield. We managed to rope him into our impromptu dance party. It was quite the sight, let me tell you. He didn't have to sneeze or anything. I think the desensitization he's going through is working.
You know, Skinner, I've been to many conventions in my time. Academic ones, literary ones, and even one where they celebrated the humble potato. But I've never heard of a furry convention before. Thanks for your explanation earlier, but I still don't quite understand what they're actually doing. Can you enlighten me as to what goes on there?
Well, Chalmers, imagine a gathering of individuals who share a common interest in anthropomorphic animal characters with human characteristics. They come together to celebrate their passion through art, literature, music, and yes, costume contests featuring said characters. It's a colorful, creative community.
Colorful indeed. And I suppose the costumes are referred to as fursuits, if I remember correctly.
Precisely, Chalmers. Although not everyone wears a full suit. Sometimes they wear smaller accessories such as ears or tails to express their identity.
Fascinating. I can only hope that if I ever attend such a convention, I won't end up being mistaken for a particularly large house cat.
Don't worry, Chalmers. You'd stand out as the only creature sporting a tweed jacket and pipe.
Perhaps I'll stick to the more conventional academic conventions then. Now, back to the topic at hand. How did your kitchen manage to accommodate this alleged furry convention? Was there enough space for all those participants?
Ah, Chalmers, you worry too much. We simply rearranged things a bit. The counters served as makeshift tables for artists showcasing their work, and the living room became the dance floor. There was plenty of room for everyone, including Cosmo, who provided the lighting effects.
Lighting effects, eh? Well, I must admit, that sounds like a Skinner and Cosmo production through and through. Just remember to give me advance notice next time, and perhaps invest in a fire extinguisher or two.
Agreed, Chalmers. After all, safety first when dealing with a certain orb and its spontaneous combustion tendencies.
Now, how many people can you usually expect on such events, Seymour?
Well, according to my research, there are over 50 furry conventions worldwide every year. The largest one, Midwest Furfest, had a self-reported attendance of 15,547 in 2023.
15,547. That's almost the entire population of Memafield.
Indeed, Chalmers, but imagine the excitement. People dressed up in fursuits, wearing artistic name badges, buying artwork, participating in auctions, and even racing in Critterlympics, all while raising money for charity.
Charity? That doesn't sound too bad. But why did it allegedly take place in your kitchen, Seymour?
Well, Chalmers, I thought it would make for an interesting change of scenery. Plus, Cosmo loved watching the races from his perch on top of the refrigerator.
You put Cosmo on the refrigerator during a furry convention?
And he seemed to enjoy himself immensely.
I don't know if I should be relieved or worried, Seymour. Still, I can't deny that it sounds like a unique experience.
Absolutely, Chalmers. A furry convention in your own home. Now that's something to remember.
Perhaps we should consider having a Memafield Furcon next year, Seymour. With your flair for organization and your unique perspective, I'm sure it will be a hit.
Only if I get to wear a fursuit, Chalmers. After all, every host deserves a chance to shine.
Seymour Skinner, you never cease to amaze me. Now, tell me, what was the main topic of discussion at this furry convention? Was it the art? The literature? Or perhaps the science behind anthropomorphic culture.
Well, Chalmers, it was actually mostly about the races. We had a furry race around the living room, complete with medals made out of chocolate.
Chocolate medals? Seymour, you really do outdo yourself.
Why, stop at the food, Chalmers. It was a full-on Olympic experience.
I bet it was quite the spectacle, Seymour. So, were there any famous guests or speakers at this event?
Oh, absolutely, Chalmers. There was Uncle Cage doing stand-up comedy in the dining room, Alkali Bismuth leading a sing, Along in the Den, and even a puppeteering performance by some local talent.
Seymour, I don't want to burst your bubble, but I think you might have exaggerated just a tad.
Ah, Chalmers, you're such a killjoy. It was a magical day filled with fun, laughter, and, of course, a healthy dose of chaos. What more could one ask for in a Saturday afternoon?
Indeed, Seymour. I suppose a furry convention in someone's kitchen is not the worst thing that could happen. Just remember to keep Cosmo away from the cookie jar next time.
Agreed, Chalmers. But one last topic before we end our episode today. Which fursuit would you prefer? And why?
Well, Seymour, I think I'd make quite the red panda. Why, wise yet playful.
Oh, absolutely. You certainly have the wisdom down, Pat. What do you like about red pandas, Chalmers?
I suppose they're pretty adorable, too. Plus, I bet no one else will be wearing a red panda suit, right?
Very true, Chalmers. It'll definitely turn heads. Now, if only we could find someone skilled enough to create such a masterpiece. Maybe Yugi knows someone, or Shadow? Shadow had supposedly met someone at the rabbit show last month. They went out together last week, and as far as I know, she is actually very good at tailoring and maybe even making fursuits.
Oh, I'm so happy for them. But yes, that would be great. I have to admit, I would love to be a female-themed furry. But say, Skinner, what do you reckon about attending that furry convention in Memofield next year? They have some incredible artists there.
That sounds like a splendid idea, Chalmers. We can explore the world of furries together and maybe even get ourselves some custom suits.
Sounds like a plan, Seymour. Can't wait to see your chef outfit transformed into a giant Cosmo. Cat.
Ah! Only if I manage to not burn the suit beyond recognition.
Don't worry, Skinner. I'm sure it'll look fabulous regardless.
Thanks, Chalmers. With your support, anything's possible.
Absolutely, Skinner. That's what friends are for. But, well, folks, that's it for today. This is Superintendent Chalmers and Principal Skinner signing off. Have a nice day. Hey?
Enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks for tuning in again.
And never forget, Sparkledog. Dear listeners, his favorite food is a can of sparkle.
That sounds sparkling.
All right, kick tear, dear ones.